My name is Evelyn Harper, and I'm 34 years old. I run a small but thriving interior design studio right out of my house in Harmony Grove, one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods outside Denver where the HOA rules your life like a miniature dictatorship dressed up as community standards. My yard is my showroom. Clean modern sculptures, a few statement planters, a custom metal sign that says, "Welcome to Actual Taste." Nothing wild, but apparently enough to make the board clutch their pearls. That June morning started normal. Coffee, emails, a client mood board for a kitchen remodel. Then I made the mistake of scrolling Instagram during my first break. There it was, sandwiched between a neighbor's dog photo and an ad for overpriced patio furniture. The official post for the Harmony Grove annual summer festival. 200 residents, live music, catered food, even a Best Lawn award ceremony. The photos showed everyone I knew. The Johnsons posing by the community gazebo, old Mrs. Delgado raising a lemonade glass, my neighbor Mike and his wife laughing under string lights. Aunt Pat, President Karen Whitaker, stood front and center in her pastel blazer, beaming like she'd invented sunshine. I scrolled through every tagged photo, counting faces the way a kid checks attendance. 34 people in the planning committee shot alone. Not one empty spot where I should have been. My hands went still on the phone. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the invite got buried in spam. Maybe they assumed I'd be too busy with work. I was already calling Karen before the thought finished. She picked up on the second ring, voice syrupy with that fake HOA politeness. "Evelyn, what a surprise." "Karen, I just saw the festival photos. Looks incredible." Long pause, the kind that lets you hear her calculating. "Oh yes, it turned out lovely. Very intimate, very harmonious. 34 committee members, and not one of them thought to invite me." Another pause, then the casual cruelty only a neighborhood dictator can deliver. "We felt it best to keep things harmonious this year. You know how you can be at community events." I stood up from my desk, pacing to the window that overlooked the perfectly mowed lawns. "How I can be? Don't take that tone, dear. You always make everything about your creative flair. The last thing we needed was another scene." "Scenes? When have I ever? Please. Remember the spring cleanup? You spent 30 seconds talking about your design awards while poor Mrs. Delgado was showing her prize roses. And at last year's potluck, you had to mention that magazine feature. It's always something with you." My reflection in the glass looked pale. "So you all decided I'd ruin the festival. That I'm such a liability you couldn't risk inviting me. Don't be dramatic. This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes a production with you. I'm being dramatic? You erase me from the biggest neighborhood event of the year, and I'm dramatic for asking why." She sighed, the sound carrying years of manufactured disappointment. The board felt, while I felt, that the festival deserved one day where everyone could shine without comparisons. Your yard, your business, it just sets an unrealistic standard. Comparisons. The word landed like ice water. I wasn't competing with anyone. I just existed. "Karen, I just live here. Sometimes that's enough, isn't it? Look, I have to go, final vendor meeting." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, staring at the blank screen while the suburban sun mocked me through the window. Outside, lawnmowers hummed and kids laughed on bikes, completely oblivious that I'd just been airbrushed out of my own community portrait. I went back to my desk, but the mood board might as well have been written in hieroglyphics. All I could see were those festival photos, Karen toasting, neighbors hugging, the whole block glowing. A perfectly curated Harmony Grove moment with one glaring omission. My laptop dinged with a text. For one wild second, I hoped it was an apology. Instead, it was from Mike next door. "Saw the festival pics, looked amazing. How come you left early?" I stared at the message. Left early. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wasn't there. 3 dots. Then what? "But Karen said you were invited, but had a big client thing." My stomach flipped. They weren't just excluding me. They were rewriting reality, crafting a version where I was the one too busy, too important, too something to show off for the neighborhood. I screenshot Mike's text. Evidence. Proof this was deliberate. My phone buzzed again, this time the official HOA Facebook page. Karen had posted a gushing thank you to everyone who made our perfect festival possible, complete with an album. The caption, "Feeling so blessed to be surrounded by our harmonious family as we celebrate another successful year." Every word mocked me. I closed the laptop, stepped onto my small back patio. The June air smelled like fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke from someone else's grill. Below, neighbors waved at each other, absorbed in their own little worlds. It would have been easier if they'd simply forgotten me, an honest oversight. But this deliberate erasure, dressed up as protecting harmony? They'd looked at the guest list and chosen the portrait without me in it. I thought about marching straight to Karen's house, demanding answers, but I could already hear her voice, patient, patronizing, explaining how this was really for the best. How sometimes the board has to make hard choices for the greater good. How surely I understood. No, I didn't. Standing there watching the neighborhood pulse with life while they celebrated without me, I made a decision. They wanted to erase me from their perfect picture. Fine, but I wouldn't vanish quietly. And I sure as hell wouldn't let them rewrite the story to paint me as the villain. I picked up my phone and opened a blank note. If they were cutting me out of the community narrative, it was time I started writing my own. I spent 3 days drafting what I wanted to say to Karen. 3 days of deleted texts and abandoned walks to her door. In the end, I chose direct confrontation. She ran her little real estate side hustle from the HOA clubhouse on Friday afternoons, always catching up on paperwork, while her loyal board members kissed the ring. The walk across the cul-de-sac felt endless. When I knocked on the clubhouse door, she looked up through the glass, her face cycling through surprise, annoyance, then that practiced resignation. "Evelyn, I wonder when you'd show up." She didn't offer me a seat. "We need to talk about the festival." She set down her Mont Blanc pen with theatrical precision. "There's nothing to discuss." The guest list was limited to 200 people, including Sandra from book club, but not me. Sandra has known the community since her kids were little. "You're newer." I stayed standing. "Karen, I've lived here 6 years. I'm on the block. I pay the dues." She leaned back in her leather chair, studying me like a problematic property. "Community isn't just about living here, Evelyn. It's about harmony, balance, knowing when to step back. Step back from what? From making everything about your success. Your design awards, your magazine spreads, your clients who fly in for Boulder. The festival was meant to be one perfect day where no one felt overshadowed." The words hit like slaps. My perfect life. I worked 70-hour weeks in a 3-bedroom I bought with my own money. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 2 years. "But you never let anyone forget how successful you are, do you?" She stood, moving to the window with its view of the identical beige houses. "Mrs. Delgado told me," she cried after the last potluck, "because your stories made her feel small. She's retired on fixed income. And here you come with another triumph. So the solution is to exile me from the one event that matters? The solution is to give the neighborhood its day without the constant comparisons. You'll have plenty of other opportunities to shine." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I'm not invited to anything else either, am I?" It wasn't a question. She nodded anyway. "It's for the best. The community needs this. And what about what I need?" She smiled that patient smile I remembered from every violation notice. "What you need, dear, is to learn that not everything is about you. The board has bent over backward to accommodate your flair. I get calls after every event because you overshadow whatever we planned." Every accusation was a twisted half-truth. Yes, I mentioned my awards when asked. Yes, I'd show my website to a neighbor's daughter interested in design. Yes, I'd talk business at the block barbecue with Mike, who begged for rebranding advice. So I was being punished for answering questions, for existing while successful. You're not being punished. You're being given an opportunity to reflect. I laughed, the sound sharp in the sterile clubhouse. By being erased. By having the whole neighborhood lie about my absence. No one's lying. Mike thinks you were invited, but couldn't come. Who told him that? She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. People make assumptions. We didn't correct them. That's lying by omission. That's protecting the festival from drama. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a showing in 20 minutes. I stay planted. What did I actually do to you, Karen? What terrible crime did I commit? For the first time, her mask slipped. You existed, Evelyn. You existed in a way that made others feel small. And maybe that's not your fault, but it's still the reality. She looked at me and saw everything she wasn't. Independent, creative, unafraid. So I should make myself smaller, dimmer, less. You should consider that sometimes community means stepping aside. She collected her purse, clearly done. The festival is June 15th. It's going to be beautiful, and the neighborhood is going to have one perfect day without anyone stealing focus. I never asked anyone to compete. No, she agreed, heading for the door. But they do anyway, and that's why you can't be there. She left me sitting in the clubhouse, surrounded by her plaques and framed President of the Year photos. The irony burned. Karen could display every trophy, wear her power like armor, but I was expected to hide mine, to pretend I hadn't earned every client. I sat there another 10 minutes, staring at the community photos on the wall. There I was in older shots, smiling, still believing I belonged. In newer ones I was already cropped out, edited from the story. When I finally left, the secretary gave me a sympathetic glance, but said nothing. In the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the shiny doors, ghostly, fading. By the time I reached my driveway, I'd made my choice. They wanted to cut me out. Fine, but I wouldn't make it easy. And I definitely wouldn't spend June 15th alone in my house, erased from my own neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. June 15th was already blocked off months ago when the first flyers went up. I deleted the entry and typed a new one. My day. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet. But I knew one thing. If they were writing me out of the community story, I was going to write a louder one. The unraveling started with a text from my neighbor Jamie, Karen's loyal lieutenant. Hey, can you stop spreading rumors? It's upsetting the whole board. I stared, genuinely confused. I hadn't told anyone except Mike the truth, and only because he asked directly. I typed back, "What rumors?" About not being invited to the festival. His reply was instant. "Dad says you're telling people you were excluded on purpose. That's really unfair when you chose not to come." The gaslighting was so blatant it stole my breath. They weren't just rewriting history. They were casting me as the villain. I screenshot everything before answering. "I never received an invitation, Jamie. That's not a rumor. That's a fact. Karen says she talked to you about it months ago. Stop playing the victim." I didn't reply. What was the point? They had their narrative locked in. But the HOA gossip machine wasn't finished. That evening, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, called. At 83, she was still sharp and twice as blunt. "Evelyn Harper, what is this nonsense about you boycotting the festival?" "I'm not boycotting anything, Mrs. Delgado. I wasn't invited." "Don't lie to me, young lady. Karen told me you declined because of some important client meeting." "That's not true. I was never invited." Long pause. "Well, Karen says you misunderstood the conversation. She says you're being difficult because you wanted to bring extra guests and threw a fit." The lies were multiplying like weeds. Now I'd apparently thrown a tantrum over a non-existent +1 to a non-existent invitation. "Mrs. Delgado, I live alone. Why would I throw a fit about guests?" "Then why aren't you coming to the neighborhood's biggest day?" "Because I wasn't invited." She made a dismissive sound. This is exactly why I've been telling Karen she's too soft on certain residents. Everything has to be about Evelyn. Can't you just be happy for the community without making it a production? She hung up before I could answer. I sat on my couch feeling like I'd slipped into an alternate universe where up was down and I was the neighborhood antagonist. By morning, the texts poured in. According to Mike, I was bitter the festival wasn't centered on my design work. According to the book club ladies, I demanded to be the featured speaker and stormed off when told no. Someone heard I planned to wear an outfit that would upstage the best dressed lawn category. Each message cut deeper, but the real damage hit my business. Thursday, I received 3 cancellation emails in 1 hour. A local boutique hotel I'd been staging for suddenly went in another direction. A nonprofit paused our contract, citing budget constraints. The third was from a neighbor who ran a small cafe. Her marketing director played golf with Karen. My family, my community, poison was leaking into my professional life. I called my best friend Sasha, the only person I trusted. She listened without interrupting, then said the words I needed. Holy crap, your HOA is running a full PR smear campaign against you. It's not about the festival, she continued. It's about control. They can't control your success, so they're controlling the story around it. What did I do that was so terrible? You stopped dimming your light. They've been telling you for years to play small, and you finally quit listening. This is punishment. I looked at the awards on my wall, the client testimonials Karen had sneered at. 3 clients fired me this week. Then get better ones that don't come with HOA strings attached. After we hung up, I did exactly what she suggested. I created a folder labeled Evidence and started saving every screenshot, every email, every note. The folder grew fast. As I worked, I noticed the festival hype exploding online. Vendors posting sneak peeks, residents counting down. June 15th was shaping up to be the event of the summer, and I was being edited out like a mistake in an otherwise perfect photo. But Sasha was right. This wasn't about one festival. This was about a neighborhood that needed me to be less so they could feel like more. And I was done obliging. I closed the evidence folder and opened a new document. At the top I typed, what I want for June 15th. Then I started a different kind of list. The conversation with Sasha haunted me for days. Her words about dimming my light echoed while I worked, trying to salvage my client list. But she planted a seed and it was growing. At 3 a.m, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, smaller. When had I started shrinking? When had I begun apologizing for taking up space? I thought of every HOA meeting, every festival, every potluck where conversation shifted away from my achievements. I'd learned to edit myself, to downplay, to stay palatable. No more. The next morning I called Sasha. I need your help. Finally. What are we doing? June 15th, I'm not hiding in my house, feeling sorry for myself. Now you're talking. What's the plan? The idea crystallized as I spoke. I've always wanted to do an open installation of my design work. Not just client projects, but the personal pieces I keep hidden. What if I did it June 15th? What if I finally stopped hiding the work that actually matters? I love it. Where? My own yard. Private property. The one place Karen's covenants can't touch for a single day. Sasha laughed. This is the Evelyn I remember from design school. The one who wasn't afraid to be brilliant. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into planning with the intensity one usually reserved for million-dollar clients. Every decision was mine. I pulled pieces from my private portfolio, abstract sculptures inspired by Colorado light, digital prints turned into yard installations, experimental signage that pushed every HOA rule. The private event loophole was my weapon. One day open house on my own land. I hired a local caterer for intimate portions, a string quartet for atmosphere, a lighting tech who understood drama. The guest list was simple. The people who actually saw me, not the version Karen sold. Fellow designers, supportive neighbors who'd whispered encouragement, the barista who always asked about my projects. I designed the invitations myself, thick cardstock with a subtle watermark of my yard at golden hour. The text read, "You are invited to witness a becoming, an evening of design, truth, and unapologetic space." June 15th, my yard, Sunset. Hosted by Evelyn Harper. I hand-delivered them, watching faces light up. My real circle was smaller than the HOA roster, but infinitely more valuable. As word spread through my network, people started sharing their own HOA horror stories. A photographer who'd been fined for too colorful flowers. A writer whose political yard sign lasted exactly one day. One message from a designer I admired hit hard. I've been making myself smaller for so long, I forgot my real size. Thank you for reminding me we're allowed to take up space. I printed it and taped it above my desk. The final week, the board's attempts at contact intensified. Texts about reconsidering, calls about not being stubborn, emails about thinking of poor Karen who worked so hard. I didn't answer any. I was done explaining myself to people who refused to hear. Instead, I focused on transforming my yard. Each piece was cleaned, lit, placed to perfection. I wrote artist statements that told the truth. No false modesty, just honesty. The centerpiece was a new installation I built specifically for the night, a digital projection of the official festival photo with me completely removed but outlined in glowing gold light. I called it Negative Space. Standing in my yard 3 days before the event, Sasha put her arm around me. You know this is about more than one festival, right? I know. Good. Because what you've built here is magnificent. I looked around at my work displayed without apology, given room to breathe for the first time. Yes, I said. She is. The call from Karen came at 7 in the morning, 3 days before June 15th. I was adjusting the final lighting when her name flashed. Curiosity won. Evelyn. Her voice was tight, the controlled fury of a president losing grip. We need to talk. Good morning to you too, Karen. Don't be glib. I know what you're doing. This so-called open house on festival day. It's unconscionable. It's a private event on my private property. Nothing to do with your festival. On the same night, at the same time, when half the neighborhood already has plans. Do you know how many people are asking if they can stop by your yard instead? I felt a flutter of satisfaction I quickly swallowed. How unfortunate for your attendance numbers. Don't play innocent. This is deliberate. This is cruel. Cruel? Like excluding me from every community event? Like spreading lies about why I'm not at the festival? Like trying to tank my business with whispers? No one sabotaged. 3 clients fired me after cozy chats with board members. My reputation in certain circles took a hit because of difficult resident rumors. So please, Karen, lecture me more about cruelty. Her breathing shifted. She was changing tactics. Evelyn, I understand you're hurt. No, you don't get to minimize what you've done by calling it hurt feelings. What do you want from the board? An apology? A retroactive invitation? It's too late for that. The festival is in 3 days. I don't want anything from you. That's what you're not understanding. This isn't about you or your perfect day. This is about me finally doing something for myself without worrying how it makes the HOA feel. On our festival day, the world doesn't stop turning because the HOA is throwing a party, despite what you all seem to think. There was a pause. Then, in her most reasonable voice, what would it take for you to cancel? I actually laughed. Are you trying to buy me off? I'm trying to prevent a neighborhood disaster. Name your price. I walked to my window, looked out at the mountains. My price would be every meeting where I was made to feel too much. Every achievement I downplayed. Every part of myself I dimmed so the rest of you could stay comfortable. Can you pay that, Karen? You're being dramatic. No, I'm being honest, which is apparently a foreign concept around here. If you do this, you'll be cutting yourself off completely. You understand that, don't you? Coming back to what? To being tolerated as long as I make myself small enough? I'm already cut off. You did that. I'm just making it official. I'm trying to protect the neighborhood from you. Yes, I understand. You've been very clear. Her voice went ice cold. You'll regret this when you're the only one not invited to anything. I'd rather be alone and surrounded by people who need me to be less than I am. Then you've made your choice. No, Karen. You made this choice when you decided I was too much. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were steady. Within an hour, the neighborhood group chat, the one I'd been quietly removed from, lit up. I know because Jamie screenshot Karen's frantic messages and sent them with one word. Drama. Evelyn is trying to ruin the festival. She's hosting some rogue event the same night. We need to warn everyone not to go. This is what happens when residents aren't taught boundaries. That last line made me laugh out loud. Yes, I was hosting 30 people in my own yard to steal attention from a 200-person HOA, a spectacle I wasn't invited to. Classic Karen logic. Then the individual text started, pleading, threatening, concerned. I didn't answer any. I had 3 days left and too much to do. The one that stopped me was for Mrs. Delgado herself. I never wanted to be like this. I just wanted one day where the neighborhood felt special. Why do you have to ruin everything? I stared at the message a long time. Part of me wanted to explain that her feeling special shouldn't require my erasure, that there was room for all of us to shine, that dimming my light had never made hers brighter. Instead, I deleted it and blocked her number. Then I blocked the rest, one by one. Not with drama, just a quiet severing of ties already cut from the other side. Sasha found me an hour later, methodically removing neighbors from my digital life. You okay? Karen tried to buy me off. Of course she did. How much? I didn't let her get that far. Though I'm curious what my dignity is worth in HOA dollars. She sat beside me. Any regrets about the timing? Maybe a little. Not because they're right, but because it gave them ammunition to paint me as the villain. They were already doing that. True. I closed my laptop. I just wish one of them had said we were wrong. Not even an apology, just an acknowledgement. Then they'd have to admit their perfect community isn't so perfect. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered. It was Patricia, owner of the boutique hotel that had dropped me. Evelyn, I need to apologize. I heard some things that influenced my decision. I've since learned those things were misrepresented. We'd like to discuss bringing you back on. After we hung up, Sasha raised an eyebrow. See, truth has a way of surfacing. That evening, I posted on my professional social media for the first time without apology. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is refusing to shrink. On June 15th, I'm hosting an installation called Becoming Visible. It's about reclaiming space and celebrating the light we're told to dim. This isn't about anyone else's story. It's about mine. And I'm finally ready to tell it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Shares, comments, messages from strangers. By bedtime, the neighborhood had been blocked, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. 2 days until June 15th. 2 days until I stopped apologizing for existing. The morning of June 14th, I woke to a handwritten note slipped under my door. The handwriting was Karen's, careful cursive on expensive stationery. I made coffee before opening it. Evelyn, I know you blocked our numbers, so this seemed the only way. The stress is affecting the entire board. 3 residents have already said they're considering your event instead of the festival, creating a rift none of us know how to heal. This isn't who you are. The neighbor I thought I knew would never be so vindictive. Cancel your little gathering, apologize to the community, and we can all move forward. If you don't, the damage will be irreversible. You'll lose your place here. Is your pride really worth that? I read it twice, photographed it for the evidence folder, then fed it to the shredder. The manipulation was textbook, guilt, threats, rewriting history, so I was the aggressor. What was missing? Any admission of why I wasn't invited in the first place. That afternoon, my website traffic spiked. A popular local blog had picked up the story. Designer reclaims her light after HO excludes her from festival. The article was thoughtful, well-researched. Comments filled with support. My phone rang. Marcus, the string quartet leader. Evelyn, I read the article. My sister sent it. I had no idea. We're playing our hearts out for you tomorrow. This isn't just a gig anymore. The morning of June 15th arrived clear and bright. I arrived at my own yard at noon. The caterer was setting up, the quartet tuning, the lights already programmed for sunset magic. Every piece commanded the space with a presence I'd never allowed before. At 4 o'clock, while Karen was probably giving her opening speech across the street, I stood in the center of my installation and felt complete. Not vindictive. Whole. 3 hours. Sasha asked, "How are you feeling?" Like myself. For the first time in years, exactly like myself. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in colors that would soon flood my yard through the open gates. Somewhere across the cul-de-sac, a boring festival was beginning. Here, something real was about to unfold. The first guests arrived at 6:45. Patricia from the hotel group stepped out first, followed by designers and supportive neighbors. The progression was perfect, cocktails giving way to genuine engagement with the art. Faces changed as they moved through the pieces. Then the unexpected guests started arriving. Mike slipped in quietly. I had to come when I found out what really happened. Others followed, distant neighbors still in festival clothes, even Mrs. Delgado's best friend Sandra. By 8 o'clock, as the sun touched the mountains, there were 40 people in my yard, 10 more than invited. Some had left the official festival mid-speech. It was then that Sasha pulled me aside. Someone's outside. It's Karen. I stepped out. Karen stood in her pastel blazer, makeup smudged, composure cracked. It was supposed to be perfect, she said hollowly. The festival was supposed to be perfect, and 3 board members left after the opening toast, said there was somewhere more important to be. The photographer asked if it was true the president excluded a resident for being too successful. She laughed bitterly. Do you know what Mrs. Delgado said when she found out people were leaving? Maybe if we hadn't tried so hard to erase her, people wouldn't be so curious about what we were hiding. Karen looked through my open gate at the warm, vibrant yard I'd created. We told everyone you were too much, that your light would overshadow ours. All we did was create a shadow, the shadow of your absence. I didn't speak. May I come in? The request hung there. This woman who had orchestrated my erasure was asking for inclusion in the space I'd built as refuge from people like her. No, I said gently but firmly. This space is for people who see my light as something to celebrate, not something to dim. You're not there yet, Karen. Maybe someday. She nodded, tears finally breaking through. I suppose I deserve that. It's not about deserving. It's about protecting what I've built. Something you should understand, given how fiercely you protected your festival. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. For making you feel like you were too much. You were never too much. We were just too small. She walked away, shoulders bowed under the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. When I returned inside, the golden hour had peaked. The entire yard glowed. My guests had formed natural circles deep in conversation about art, truth, visibility. This was what I'd built, not in opposition to a festival, but in dedication to authenticity. As the sun touched the mountains, Marcus caught my eye and nodded. The quartet shifted into their finale. I moved to the center, standing before negative space. Thank you all for being here. For witnessing not just art, but an act of becoming. For understanding there's room for all of us to shine. 40 voices joined mine in a toast, not to what had been taken, but to what had been reclaimed. Somewhere across the street, a festival continued without me. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly as it should be. The local blog posted at 10 that night, while the last guests lingered. Designers Counter-Event steals spotlight from HOA Festival. The article described my installation in detail, quoted attendees, noted I had declined to comment on the HOA situation beyond confirming the timing was coincidental. My phone showed dozens of new messages. The early ones from the board were furious. The later ones sounded confused, hurt. One from Mike simply said, "The blog really got it right." A call came through, "Mrs. Delgado." I answered. "How could you?" Her voice thick with tears. People were checking their phones during my thank you speech, talking about your yard during the awards. I didn't invite any of them. And now it's in the paper. My festival is the event Evelyn Harper upstaged. I took a deep breath. You excluded me because you were afraid I'd overshadow the neighborhood by simply existing. Do you see the irony? She was crying harder. I just wanted one perfect day, and you could have had it. All you had to do was not make your perfect day dependent on my erasure. I hung up gently. Outside, I watched the crew carefully wrap negative space. In a way that peace had predicted everything. The golden outline of absence that somehow made the picture complete. My absence from the festival had become more present than my attendance ever could have been. Sasha joined me. What now? Now I go inside, sleep for a week, then figure out what a life looks like when you're not making yourself smaller for other people's comfort. Sounds terrifying. Sounds free. The next morning my inbox was full of inquiries. Gallery owners, collectors, a national magazine wanted to feature artists who refused to shrink. But the personal messages touched me deepest. Strangers sharing their own HOA horror stories. Neighbors quietly admitting they'd been told to play small too. My story, so specific, had touched something universal. I made coffee and sat on my patio watching the neighborhood wake up. Somewhere Karen was probably spinning new versions where I remained the villain. But here, in my yard filled with morning light and the faint scent of last night's success, I felt peace. Not bitter revenge served cold, but quiet alignment. My insides finally matched my outsides. I was living as myself, not the edited version the HOA required. My phone rang, Mike. Hey, I know things are crazy, but I wanted to thank you. For what? For showing me what courage looks like. I've been playing small my whole life, too. Seeing your yard last night made me realize how much I've been hiding. We talked for 20 minutes. He was already thinking of starting his own small business. Maybe that was the real gift, not the new clients or the article, but the permission it gave others to choose themselves, too. The sun climbed higher, warming my face, illuminating everything. June 15th was over. But what had started was just beginning. I had chosen visibility. I had chosen myself. And in that choice, I had finally found home. 6 months later, the yard was hosting its second official show, this time sponsored by the very hotel group that once dropped me. New pieces explored what happens after you stop hiding. The centerpiece was still negative space, now part of a traveling exhibit. Karen had stepped down as president after a quiet petition circulated. The new board was already loosening some of the more ridiculous covenants. Mrs. Delgado sent a single card. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I kept it on my desk as a reminder. Some stories don't need neat endings. They just need truth. The lights in the yard dimmed softly that night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to choose visibility over comfortable invisibility. But tonight, surrounded by work I no longer hid, I was complete. Not because I'd proven anyone wrong. Not because I'd stolen anyone's spotlight. But because I had finally, fully, unapologetically chosen to shine my own light. Not in competition with anyone else's, but simply because light is meant to be seen. And that, more than any revenge or vindication, was the real victory. Sometimes the best response to being told you're too much is to become even more yourself. The light was mine. It always had been. I just had to be brave enough to switch it on.